Next link. Talking points next. Okay, this week's Talking Points headed by Syndicates. The 2-minute clock are ready to go, and I'm going to come to Dave first of all on this. EPDS, the latest racing syndicate that looks as if it's on the brink of folding. It's yet another one, Dave. How does the sport of racing protect itself from this happening again?
Right, well, I think that this is obviously something now that the BHA has to look at. Syndicates are traditionally in this country a way whereby not only can a person of average or lower income club together with other people of similar financial clout stroke lack of to own horses, but they've also been a very good way of selling the sport to the general public, in that you can actually enjoy the thrill of ownership yourself, not by being an oil sheikh or being some big city financier, but just with clubbing together with a load of other people. Now, obviously, in the last few months, there have been a rash of stories. The Racing Post has covered this. The Daily Mail, Marcus Townend, has also been at the front of the field on this. And perhaps it's time for the BHA to look at this with regard to, you know, ramping up the qualifications for fit and proper people to run syndicates, because probably more so than, OK, I promise I'll mention the whip once and once only on this programme, but probably more so than stories like that of a jockey getting a whip ban. What the public don't want to hear, particularly those who are teetering on the edge of being interested in racing, is stories of collapse of syndicates whereby it's seen as something as a bit of a con where people have wasted their money.
Harry, you rode a Midland Park horse yesterday to victory. A
very good syndicate.
At Haydock, and they have made a success of syndicates. What do you think is the key ingredient?
Well, obviously, you need the right horses. With anything, you need the ammunition. But they obviously are going out. Then they know the sort of horses that they need to be getting, and they're doing it the right way. It's working for them.
And James, Australia have made a great, and America, it's great for syndicates out there.
They work two different ways. In Australia, they're much like here, with people getting involved, kind of who can't afford necessarily a whole horse, and they've been very successful there. But in America, they're used in a subtle and interesting way, which I think people over here should use, which is that major owners syndicate themselves together so that they can spread the risk of acquiring horses at the yearling sales that are otherwise very expensive to buy as a certain item. And you see Windstar Farm in America and the China Horse Club all over the world have kind of formed these syndicates. Coolmore, after all, he's sort of a syndicate, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course Godolphin originally.
The Maxim family together. Well, some of Hamdan's finest mares were subsumed by the organisation over the years, so yeah, I mean, it's. I think that the point here, though, is regulation, isn't it? Is that right? Am I right?
Due diligence on syndicates.
And I think
Yeah.
Dave's spoken well, and I think we do need to tighten up on these things. They're not a licence.
Yes.
Not I'm suggesting this one, but they're not in general a licence to separate people from their cash for, you know, like charities. Some charities are.
Yes. We're still in the week post week after the Derby, and as has been the case in many a year, the subject of a Wednesday Derby keeps cropping its head back up. Dave, where do you stand on Derby going back?
I'm against it. I broached this on Racing TV last Saturday. I thought that the debate would reopen because of the Champions League final. It's the first time that there's been a final between two English clubs in a Champions League final on a Saturday. Remember the Chelsea-Man United game a few years ago was on a Wednesday. And it's just something that last week's Derby was pretty difficult to sell, largely because it was you had Anthony Joshua, you had the Cricket World Cup, you had interest obviously in the Nations League and of course the Champions League final. So that was hard to sell. I don't think it should come back. I think with this thing about the Hill, what we need to get round is you just need to put on something like the Heart FM Roadshow. That will bring loads of people onto it. They might not be great racing enthusiasts, but if you want the Hill covered in people, that's pretty much what you're going to have to look at, I suspect.
James, is the Derby Epsom officials seem to say they're not changing it. So why are we even having the debate? Why shouldn't we just concentrate on making it better where it is?
I think we need something to talk about sometimes. I mean, I don't have a view on this, really. I'm not against all four. I can see the arguments on both sides. I think horse racing needs to become more interesting, I think. I don't think it's exploring its potential to be interesting. It's interesting to those who have got a horse, who have got a runner, who know a jockey or are a trainer or know a trainer or work in a yard. But to the outside guy, there's no way in. They don't have any way in. Markets are incredibly difficult to beat. Hobbyist punters are disappearing from the sport in their thousands because they're doing their brains. They can't beat syndicates that have got data that they don't have. And I think, generally speaking, the sport's not exploring its full potential to excite the man on the street. And I think it's that which is the problem for the Derby, not really what day that it's run on, in my view.
OK. John Gosden's filly, Annapurna, won the Oaks at Epsom. Connections, Harry, have taken the decision to give her a bit of a break, come back later in the autumn. They've mentioned a couple of very big targets, Irish champion potentially, and the Arc. Are they doing the right thing with this filly, and is there something that you've seen in the way she's raced that makes you think that that's what she should be doing, having a bit of a break and coming back?
Well, I'm certainly not in a position to be saying that John Gosden is not doing the right thing with her. I mean, he obviously knows the filly and what's best for her, but there are certainly some really big targets to go for towards the end of the season, which he's highlighted. And I suppose to go from now all the way through and then expect to be running well in those big races at the end of the season is no mean feat. So perhaps giving her an easier time now is the right thing.
She's done a lot already so far this season, James. I mean, how good was her Oaks win in your opinion?
Not that great. I thought she was the third best horse on the day, according to sectional times. Pink Dogwood was the best and Fleeting was the second best. But she might have, as Harry's, I think he's summed it up very well, Harry. I think you've got to map out a programme, leave it to the people that have the horse, and I think it's a general point, if I may make this general point. Horses are not raced enough. I don't understand why people find a reason not to run all the time, and it's almost like that they're trying to sort of offset the disappointment for their owners a lot of the time, and they're looking upon horse racing, some trainers, as a sort of bed and breakfast business, just to keep the horse in the yard as long as possible, and the more times you run it, the more it loses its value, because it is an economic fact that owning horses is massively negative EV, and therefore the more you run them, the more they lose their value. It's a bit like a car taking a new car out of the showroom. The moment it actually tries to race, it loses its value, and so I think we need to encourage people to run their horses more often rather than waiting 6 weeks between runs, even with ordinary horses. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, does it? I mean, the ordinary horses can run more often than every 6 weeks, which is about the average, but they don't, because I don't think trainers like disappointing their owners. I don't know what it is. You'll have to ask trainers, I don't know.
Speaking of trainers, the next person, or the next subject on this week's Talking Points is a retiring trainer, admittedly after Royal Ascot, Jeremy Neceda, Dave.
Yeah, I was very surprised by this. I know that the Neceda camp, that the numbers have gone down in previous years. Jeremy Neceda is 55, I believe. I was surprised and I was disappointed. You know, it's no great secret that we've had our differences over the years. I should also say that at the Dante meeting, Jeremy very kindly sponsored, belatedly, my Land's End John O'Groats Bow. I did this, sorry, I know I've never mentioned it before. I did it in 2014. But a hugely able trainer. I think that probably a guy who I suspect, from looking in from the outside, someone who's better at training horses maybe than dealing politically with owners. But that's just my view. But hugely able, one of the rising stars of his profession when he took over. Obviously, time with John Dunlop, John Gosden, Godolphin. I sincerely hope that he comes back and that we can cross swords again in the next few years.
Any thoughts on Jeremy Neceda's training career, some of the horses that stood out for you during that time?
Well, I haven't been someone who's ridden an awful lot for Jeremy over the years, so I'm probably not in a position to sort of say too much, but yeah, obviously he's had a fantastic career and some big highlights.
Yeah, I thought Soldier's Tale winning at Ascot, he was a horse that had a lot of problems when he won I think it was the Golden Jubilee or Diamond.
It was, yeah, it was the Golden.
It's amazing training performance. He's very capable of on the big day, wasn't he, of Laddie's Poker too.
Oh, I'll never forget that.
I think you could probably name like at least a dozen instances during his career when you thought he's good.
Wow. Yeah.
at training, and so it's a shame that he's departed the profession. I don't know quite what the reasons are, but I suspect it's failing horsepower. He hasn't had many group winners for a while, which again must be a reflection of his horsepower, because it's certainly not a reflection of his capabilities.
Indeed.
And Wilco, his training of that horse was outstanding.
Yeah, Wilco.
Yeah.
Some great stories about Wilco not being right before the race, and Jeremy working miracles to get that horse to win the Breeders' Cup.
You know, a hugely able practitioner, and you know, I'm not going to make any silly puerile jokes. A situation whereby his retirement leaves the sport the poorer.
Yeah,
fair enough. Another retirement, someone whose name has been mentioned by this trainer Nicky Henderson countless times over the last 40 years or so. Corky Brown announced earlier this week that he's calling it a day. Dave, I don't think Nicky Henderson, any post-race interview for any Grade 1 winner, has failed to mention Corky Brown, is he? Is that right?
Yeah.
Probably not. I mean, he's been such a huge part of the training operation at Nicky Henderson's, hasn't he, over the decades? I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine the place without him. I don't want to sound like some troublemaker, but Nicky Henderson and I have had our differences.
Wait a minute,
hang on.
Is he giving you 50
It's
quid?
not me, it's them. But one thing that I always enjoyed was interacting with Corky Brown. You know, a trilbid figure at the races, obviously an amazing empathy with the thoroughbred, this benign presence with a rather impish grin, softly spoken, and I always enjoyed, even if I was out of favour with the boss, it was always very comforting to go and talk to Corky about certain horses, and his, as I say, his love for and empathy with them shone through.
He's almost a mythical.
Yeah.
A mythical figure, because you never often saw him. Occasionally, you might get a glimpse of him, but you would hear about this figure.
It's hugely to Nicky Henderson's credit when you think about it, isn't it? There are certain trainers that never mention any of their staff and almost blanch at when they're brought up in front of them, as if it might be bad for business to credit anybody else. But yeah, you're right. It's a good way of putting it. Yeah, even from my earliest memories of watching jump racing, he was often mentioned on the BBC and stuff, wasn't he? Who is this? And thoroughly deserving character.
Yeah, we wish him the very best in retirement.
Absolutely.
But as everybody says, he's going to be there. He's going to be around the yard anyway. We'll move on and talk about prize money in relation to Royal Ascot. Now, Harry, for someone who knows the international scene quite well, there's chat about the fact that the Australian horses aren't coming over in the numbers that they had previously. A race like the Everest, for example, is a big draw to keep the top sprinters there. Do you think prize money at Ascot matches the stature that we give the meeting at the Royal Meeting?
Well, possibly not. I mean, with the Everest being on, it seems. It makes you wonder why would they come over to Royal Ascot? There doesn't seem a lot to sort of lure them in. They have to travel an awful long way, which some horses just don't take well. So, I mean, if you ask me, I don't see why they would.
I mean, it's a fair point. I mean, why would you want to travel all that way? I mean, it's obviously a running theme with Winks for all those years.
Well, they come for the jelly bean, don't they? They come for the Queen. They come because Royal Ascot trades on it being a unique situation that they will never forget if they succeed. However, as I said earlier on this week, I'm massively worried about this in the long run. I think British racing is so complacent about this prestige and how it fills the gap of prize money. I mean, they run state-bred maiden races in New York for 100,000 now. Why the dickens would you have a horse trained here if you're a businessman? Some who have got like a transatlantic office, or it makes no sense. And now people are beginning to wake up to that. And as the economic situation around the world changes and is in flux, and the Chinese subsume even more of the world's working capital than they had previously, it only takes a small shift in the way that people view their money and view their investment in horse racing to cause a tectonic change in the state of racing here. We are so complacent about our racing here, and the always British this is better than anything else in the world, British that is better than anything else. Well, it ain't anymore. And when you look how vibrant racing is in Australia, and even America's starting to catch up as well,
Yeah.
having gone through a period in the doldrums. I think I really believe there should be a council of war at the moment. I don't think people are anywhere near urgent enough about what's happening and what's going on, and making racing entertaining is all part of it.
Luckily, at Royal Ascot, there are still some clashes that we will be excited by, assuming that everyone turns up fit and well. The Racing Post today have gone hard on Blue Point against Battash in the King's Stand. Don't forget Mabs Cross as well. We've touched on
Yeah.
Sea of Class, etc. In the Prince of Wales Stakes. And there's some other good races there's in the Gold Cup. There's the potential of Stradivarius against Cross Counter, and even Kew Gardens should protections potentially go for that race. Dave, it still pulls in some very good horses, obviously, and we have on our hands at the Royal Meeting some very, very sellable clashes.
Yes, we have, and obviously I agree with the point that racing has traded, British racing has traded on its prestige for too long. Ascot, obviously, a wonderful meeting. The ladies in their finery, the gentlemen in their silk toppers.
But that's absolutely shambolic. Where could I?
The interesting thing that you've mentioned, Richie, that all those horses that you've mentioned in those three races, what's the common theme? They're not stablemates. Cross Counter, Stradivarius,
Kew Gardens.
Kew Gardens.
Yeah.
Battash, Blue Point, Mabs Cross.
Yeah.
Crystal Ocean,
Massar.
Sea of
Sea of
Class.
Class.
Right? There are no stablemates
point.
there. And that
Strong.
makes it easier to sell from a journalistic point of view, and that, to return to the Wednesday Derby this year, was a problem. The lads at Coolmore have given the Derby great support for commercial reasons, not as a charity, but it's much easier to sell a sport when you've got different yards in opposition rather than 7 horses running from the same stable.
Harry, what's the clash you'd be most excited to see at Royal Ascot this year?
I think Massar coming back against Sea of Class for me would be the standout.
Yeah.
I think obviously seeing him come back from last year, it's an exciting one.
Have you got a topper for Royal Ascot?
I've got one, but Dave's trying to sell me one.
Outed! Excellent, Harry. That's brilliant. You made my day.
That has been
Brilliant.
this week's Talking Point. Tremendous.
James.